All right, future IAS officers, are you ready for another deep dive? Let's get right into it. Today we're going to be focusing on the most important current affairs from December 13th. You know, the kind of stuff that could make or break your UPSC prelims.
It's amazing how even seemingly small news items can end up being super relevant to those tricky exam questions.
Exactly. And today we've got a pretty diverse range of topics, everything from international environmental agreements to the latest advancements in Indian defense tech.
It's all connected in one way or another.
So first up, let's head over to the Mediterranean.
Ah, the Med.
Yeah. Researchers there have actually tagged a shortfin mako shark for the first time ever in that region.
Now, I know you might be thinking, cool shark, sure, but what's the UPSC connection?
All right.
Well, this species happens to be critically endangered.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's listed on CITES Appendix 2, and it's also known for its oviviparous reproduction.
Over what now?
Oviviparous. It means they produce eggs, but the eggs hatch internally.
Okay, so basically they give birth to live young, but from eggs.
Precisely. All of that, the endangered status, CITES listing, the reproduction, those are all potential prelims questions right there.
You got to know your shark facts.
You do. Plus, you need to understand the role of the IUCN in assessing species vulnerability and what it means when a highly migratory species like the mako shows up in a new area.
It's all about that ecological awareness that UPSC loves to test.
Exactly. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. From the ocean to a river a little closer to home. Have you heard about what's happening with the Chakki River?
The Chakki.
Yeah. Stone-crushing units are actually impacting its natural flow.
Really? That's wild.
It is. And the case has even reached the National Green Tribunal. You know, the NGT.
Ah, yes, the NGT.
So for those of you studying geography for UPSC, remember, location is key. The Chakki River is a tributary of the Bees. It flows through Himachal Pradesh and Punjab.
Do you think our listeners can name any other major tributaries of the Bees?
Maybe. It could be a good little pop quiz.
All right, we'll come back to that. But first, I want to touch on the role of the NGT in this case.
It's a good example of how institutions like the NGT play a crucial role in resolving environmental disputes.
Right, and knowing about its powers and functions, well, that could be super useful for your prelims.
You bet. Okay, now let's talk defense tech. This is something that always seems to pop up in the exam.
Always.
So the U.S. has just unveiled a brand new anti-missile system.
Ooh, this sounds interesting.
It's called Dark Eagle, and they're claiming it can intercept basically any type of missile. Ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, even hypersonic missiles.
Hold on, hypersonic missiles, those things are like incredibly fast, right?
They are. We're talking Mach 5 and beyond.
Wow. So how does this Dark Eagle system actually work?
Well, it uses something called a CHGB warhead. Basically, it's designed to hit targets at those same hypersonic speeds.
So it's fighting fire with fire.
Exactly, which makes it incredibly difficult for enemy missiles to dodge or intercept.
I can only imagine.
It's pretty cutting-edge stuff.
So what do you think? How could this new technology impact international relations?
That's a great question, and it's the kind of big picture thinking that UPSC often tests.
Right, like could this spark a new arms race or maybe even shift the balance of power?
All important things to consider. Now, how about we travel back in time a bit?
Ooh, I like where this is going. How far back are we talking?
About 5,000 years. We're going to visit the Pandupal Hanuman Temple.
The Pandupal Hanuman Temple. That name sounds familiar.
It's a site with both historical and ecological significance. It's located within the Sariska Tiger Reserve in Rajasthan.
Sariska. Okay, now it's all coming back to me.
Good. You should be familiar with Sariska. It was actually the first reserve in India to successfully relocate tigers.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a pretty important place from a conservation perspective. And it's got unique flora and fauna. Plus, it's nestled in the Aravalli Range.
So much history packed into one place.
Right. And then you have this ancient temple right in the middle of it all. It raises some interesting questions about how we balance religious practices with conservation efforts.
Especially when you're talking about protecting endangered species like tigers.
Absolutely. It's a delicate situation. And the Supreme Court has even gotten involved, which makes it even more relevant for the UPSC exam.
A potential case study right there. Okay, let's shift gears again, this time to a topic that's almost guaranteed to show up on your prelims.
Oh, I know this one. We're talking about doping in sports.
Yeah, got it. Specifically, how do we catch athletes who are using increasingly sophisticated methods to gain an edge?
It's a constant cat and mouse game.
It really is. But there's a new tool in the arsenal, the Athlete Biological Passport. Ever heard of it?
The ABP. Yes, I have. It's a pretty fascinating approach. Instead of looking for specific banned substances, it monitors an athlete's biological markers over time.
So it's like creating a unique fingerprint for each athlete,
Exactly. And then any sudden or suspicious changes could be a red flag.
a sign that something's up.
Exactly. Now, for those of you prepping for prelims, you should know that the ABP has three main modules.
3 modules, okay.
Yep. The hematological module, the steroidal module, and the endocrine module. Each one focuses on different types of potential doping.
Interesting. And I actually have some breaking news about the ABP here in India.
Oh, tell me more.
Well, India's National Dope Testing Laboratory, the NDTL has just been approved as an APMU by WADA.
Hold on, an APMU. What's that?
It stands for Athlete Passport Management Unit. Basically, it means the NDTL is now recognized by the World Anti-Doping Agency as a center for managing and analyzing these biological passports.
That's a big deal. It's a huge boost for India's anti-doping efforts. Shows that we're meeting international standards.
Exactly. Now, speaking of international standards, let's talk about another area where India is making some serious waves. Artificial intelligence, or AI for short.
AI, the technology that everyone's talking about these days.
It's everywhere, and India is definitely not being left behind. Did you know that over 8.6 lakh candidates have already enrolled in the India AI Future Skills platform?
Wow, 8.6 lakh. That's a lot of people.
It is. It shows just how much interest there is in AI within India.
And for good reason. It's a rapidly growing field with tons of potential.
So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the India AI Future Skills platform is basically a massive online learning hub. It's all about equipping Indians with the skills they need to succeed in an increasingly AI-driven world.
It's a key part of the larger India AI mission, which is all about making India a global leader in artificial intelligence.
And what I find really cool is the focus on inclusivity. They've got these data and AI labs specifically targeting Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities.
Smart move. It's all about expanding access to AI education beyond just the major metropolitan areas, tapping into a much wider pool of talent.
Exactly. And speaking of talent, let's talk about a very special visitor to India. Have you heard about the Malayan Night Heron?
The Malayan Night Heron, that's a new one for me.
Well, it's a migratory bird that's usually found in Southeast Asia. But guess what?
What?
It was just spotted for the first time ever in Madurai, Tamil Nadu.
Wow, all the way from Southeast Asia to Madurai. That's quite a journey.
It is. And it's a good reminder that for UPSC, geography can be as specific as a particular hill range or even a district.
Absolutely. You got to know your locations. And speaking of specific locations, let's head over to Arunachal Pradesh.
Arunachal Pradesh. All right, what's happening there?
We're going to visit the De-Airing Memorial Wildlife Sanctuary. It's located in the East Siang district.
East Siang district. Got it.
And, sometimes older names can pop up in exam questions, so it's worth noting that this sanctuary used to be called the Lali Wildlife Sanctuary.
Ah, good to know.
Yeah. Now, this sanctuary is a biodiversity hotspot.
I bet.
We're talking tigers, elephants, and some incredibly rare birds like the white-winged wood duck and the Bengal florican.
Beautiful.
They are. And this is a good reminder to brush up on the unique flora and fauna of different regions in India.
Especially those with high biodiversity, like Arunachal Pradesh.
Exactly. Okay, ready for a bit of a heavier topic?
Sure, let's hear it.
This one's about health concerns. A new study has linked high levels of manganese in drinking water to an increased risk of cancer.
Oh, wow, that's scary.
It is. And this is specifically happening in the Gangetic plains of Bihar.
Bihar, okay.
Now, this brings up several important points for UPSC. First, you need to understand what manganese is. It's a metal. Actually, it's the 5th most abundant metal on Earth, and it's essential for human health, but only in very small amounts.
So too much of a good thing can be bad.
Exactly. And in excess, it can be toxic.
Got it.
Now, second, you need to consider the environmental aspect. Where does manganese occur naturally? How does it end up contaminating water sources? These are key questions for the environmental science portion of the syllabus.
Right. And finally, there are the public health implications. Why is this study particularly alarming? What are the potential long-term consequences of manganese contamination? This could even be a starting point for an essay question, about the link between environmental health and societal well-being.
That's a great point. It's all connected.
It really is. Okay, I want to circle back to something we discussed earlier, the athlete biological passport. I'm really fascinated by how it actually works. It's like having a biological detective on the case.
I like that analogy. You're right. Instead of just looking for the banned substances themselves, the ABP tracks the athlete's biological parameters over time. So you're establishing this unique baseline for each individual.
So any sudden changes from that baseline.
Could be a sign of doping, even if you can't detect the actual substance being used. Think of it like a long-term health record. It can reveal subtle signs of foul play.
Brilliant. Now, for our listeners who are focusing on the prelims, can you quickly remind us about the 3 modules within the ABP?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
the first one is the hematological module. This one focuses on markers related to blood doping, things like red blood cell count, hemoglobin levels, anything that might indicate the athlete is manipulating their blood to enhance their performance.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the second module?
The second one is the steroidal module. As the name suggests, it looks for signs of steroid use. It analyzes urine and serum samples to detect the presence of what we call exogenous steroids, those synthetic hormones that can artificially boost muscle growth.
Gotcha. And the third module?
The third module is the endocrine module. This one keeps tabs on human growth hormone, or HGH, doping. It looks for evidence of HGH or its analogs, which, similar to steroids, can give athletes an unfair advantage by promoting muscle growth and recovery.
So basically, the ABP is a 3-pronged attack against doping. And it's getting a big boost here in India now that the NDTL is officially recognized as an athlete passport management unit by WA.
That's right. It's a significant development showing India's commitment to clean sport and our ability to meet those international standards in anti-doping efforts.
Absolutely. And speaking of meeting international standards, let's talk a bit more about artificial intelligence. AI. The India AI Future Skills Platform is a fantastic example of how India is stepping up in this field.
It is. And with over 8.6 lakh candidates already enrolled, it's clear that people in India are eager to jump into the world of AI.
They are. And the platform is designed to give them the skills they need to thrive in a world that's becoming increasingly AI-driven.
Exactly. Now, one thing I find particularly commendable about this initiative is the focus on inclusivity. With those data and AI labs specifically targeting Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities.
I agree. It's a smart move, expanding access to AI education beyond just those major metropolitan areas.
It's all about tapping into that vast pool of talent that exists all across India.
And fostering innovation nationwide.
Precisely. Now, let's not forget the bigger picture here. The India AI Future Skills Platform is just one part of a much larger strategy. The India AI mission.
The India AI mission.
Okay. The goal is to position India as a global leader in artificial intelligence. And this mission has 7 key pillars.
7 pillars. I'm listening.
They are core research, AI for social good, data and infrastructure, enabling ecosystem, ethics and governance, skills and education, and international collaboration.
Wow, that's pretty comprehensive.
It is. And understanding each of these pillars and how they interact is crucial. You could easily see an essay question on this in the UPSC exam.
Like how AI for social good can be implemented in India.
Exactly. Or how the mission addresses ethics and governance in AI development. You need to think beyond just the headlines and consider the deeper implications of these initiatives for society, for the economy, and for international relations.
Great point. Okay, let's take a break from the tech world for a moment and get back to nature. Earlier, we mentioned the fascinating case of the Pandupal Hanuman Temple, located within the Sariska Tiger Reserve.
It's a situation that really highlights the challenges of balancing cultural and religious practices with conservation efforts, especially when it comes to protecting endangered species.
Imagine a 5,000-year-old temple full of history and religious significance, situated right in the middle of a critical tiger habitat. It's a tough situation to navigate.
It is. And the fact that the Supreme Court is involved makes it even more significant. This case could easily show up in a prelims question, testing your knowledge of environmental law, the powers of the judiciary, even the cultural geography of the region.
It also highlights a larger point for UPSC preparation. Understanding the legal and ethical framework surrounding environmental issues is just as important as knowing the scientific facts.
Absolutely. Remember, the UPSC exam isn't just about rote memorization. It's about applying your knowledge, analyzing complex situations, and understanding the real-world challenges facing India today.
Speaking of complex challenges, let's revisit our earlier discussion about the Dark Eagle anti-missile system and what it could mean for international relations.
It's a game changer, there's no doubt about that. But like with any major technological advancement, especially in the defense sector, there are questions about strategic stability and the potential for things to escalate.
Right. If one country develops a system that can neutralize even hypersonic missiles, it's bound to trigger reactions from other nations.
Exactly. It could lead to an arms race, with countries scrambling to develop their own hypersonic weapons or countermeasures.
And that's where things get tricky, right? Hypersonic weapons are incredibly fast and maneuverable. They're difficult to detect, difficult to intercept. So the risk of miscalculation or accidental escalation increases.
It's a classic security dilemma. One country's actions to enhance its own security can end up making other countries feel less secure. And that can lead to a spiral of mistrust and tension.
So while the Dark Eagle system itself is a technological marvel, its impact on global security is far more complex and uncertain. And that's exactly the kind of nuanced analysis that the UPSC exam demands.
You got it.
Now, let's shift our attention back to environmental concerns. The study about manganese contamination in Bihar is a stark reminder of just how important clean water is and the consequences we face when environmental regulations are neglected.
It's sobering to think that something as essential as water can become a source of harm when it's contaminated. And manganese is just one example. There are countless other pollutants out there that pose serious risks to human health.
It's a huge issue, especially in a country like India, where access to clean water is already a major challenge for so many communities.
Absolutely. It highlights the urgent need for sustainable water management practices, stricter enforcement of environmental laws, and effective monitoring systems to ensure the safety of our water resources.
Couldn't agree more. And it also underscores the interconnectedness of environmental health and social justice.
You're right. The most vulnerable communities are often disproportionately affected by pollution and lack access to adequate health care. It's a complex issue with far-reaching consequences.
Well, from the complexities of international security to the fundamental right to clean water, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. And for our aspiring IAS officers out there, each of these issues offers valuable insights for the UPSC exam.
Remember, the exam isn't just about knowing the facts. It's about understanding the underlying causes, seeing the interconnectedness of these issues, and thinking critically about their potential implications for India's present and future. So picking up where we left off, with these multifaceted challenges, I think it's worth circling back to the athlete biological passport.
ABP. Yeah, okay.
I'm really intrigued by how it works. It's like you have this biological detective constantly on the case.
Right. Always watching, always analyzing.
Exactly. So instead of just trying to catch athletes red-handed with banned substances, the ABP, it monitors all those biological parameters over time, and it creates this unique baseline for each athlete.
So any deviations from that baseline, any sudden changes?
Could point to doping. Even if you can't actually detect the specific substance being used, it's like having this long-term health record that can reveal those subtle signs of, foul play.
It's pretty brilliant when you think about it.
It is. Now, I know we have a lot of prelims-focused listeners out there, so can we just quickly recap those 3 modules within the ABP?
Yes, please. A reminder would be great.
Okay, so first up, you have the hematological module. This one focuses on markers related to blood doping.
Blood doping, right?
Yep. Things like red blood cell count, hemoglobin levels, anything that could suggest that an athlete is manipulating their blood to, boost their performance.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the second module?
The second one is the steroidal module.
The steroids.
As the name suggests, it looks for evidence of steroid use. It analyzes urine and serum samples, looking for those synthetic hormones, the ones that can artificially boost muscle growth.
Gotcha. So what's the third one all about?
The third module is the endocrine module, and this one is all about human growth hormone doping, or what we call HGH doping.
HGH, okay.
It looks for signs of HGH or its analogs being used, which, similar to steroids, can give athletes that unfair advantage by promoting muscle growth and speeding up recovery.
So it's like a 3-pronged attack against doping.
Exactly. And here in India, it's getting a big boost now that the NDTL is recognized as an athlete passport management unit by FADOA.
Right. A big step forward for anti-doping efforts in India.
Absolutely. And, speaking of India making strides on the international stage, we can't forget about artificial intelligence.
AI. Oh, yeah, we were just talking about that.
With over 8.6 lakh candidates already enrolled in that Indie AI Future Skills platform, it's clear that there's a lot of interest in AI here.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's trying to get a piece of the AI pie these days.
And for good reason. It's a field with massive potential.
Absolutely. So for anyone who needs a refresher, the Indie AI Future Skills platform is this huge online learning hub all about equipping Indians with the skills they need to, navigate this increasingly AI-driven world.
And it's a crucial part of the India AI mission, which is all about positioning India as a global AI powerhouse.
And what I really like about this whole initiative is the emphasis on inclusivity.
The focus on Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities.
Yeah. It's really smart to expand access to AI education beyond just the big cities.
It is. It's all about tapping into that vast pool of talent that exists all over India.
Right, and spreading those opportunities around.
Now, we can't forget about the big picture here. The India AI Future Skills Platform is just one piece of the puzzle.
So remind me, what's that bigger picture?
The India AI mission. It's a comprehensive strategy with 7 core pillars.
7 pillars, okay.
They are core research, AI for social good, data and infrastructure, enabling ecosystem, ethics and governance, skills and education, which we've already touched on, and then international collaboration.
That's a lot to cover.
It is. But understanding each of those pillars and how they all fit together, that's super important for the UPSC exam.
Right. Like you could get an essay question about how AI for social good can be put into practice in India.
Exactly. Or maybe how the mission addresses the ethical and governance aspects of AI development. You have to think beyond just those headlines and consider the wider implications of all these initiatives, how they affect society, the economy, international relations, the whole picture.
Great points. Okay, let's shift gears again. Remember earlier when we talked about the Pandupal Hanuman Temple, the one located within the Sariska Tiger Reserve?
Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating case.
It really is. It highlights the complexities of balancing cultural and religious practices with conservation efforts, especially when you're trying to protect endangered species.
It's a delicate balancing act for sure.
Imagine you have the 5,000-year-old temple, steeped in history and religious significance, right in the heart of a crucial tiger habitat. Not an easy situation.
And the fact that the Supreme Court is involved makes it even more interesting, at least from a UPSC perspective.
Right, like this could easily be a prelims question.
Totally. Testing your knowledge of environmental law, maybe the powers of the judiciary, or even the cultural geography of the region, it's a multi-layered issue.
It really is. And it underscores a really important point for anyone prepping for the UPSC exam. It's not enough to just know the scientific facts about the environment. You also have to understand the legal frameworks, the ethical dimensions.
Absolutely. Remember, the UPSC exam is not about rote memorization. It's about applying your knowledge, analyzing complex situations, and thinking critically about the challenges that India is facing.
Well said. Now, speaking of complex challenges, let's go back to our discussion about the Dark Eagle anti-missile system. We were talking about its potential impact on international relations.
It's a game changer, that's for sure. But like with any major advancement in defense tech, you have to ask those tough questions about strategic stability and the potential for escalation.
Because if one country suddenly has the ability to neutralize even hypersonic missiles, other countries are going to react.
Of course. It could trigger an arms race with everyone scrambling to develop their own hypersonic capabilities, or maybe even countermeasures.
And that's where things can get a little scary.
Hypersonic weapons, they're incredibly fast, super maneuverable. It makes them very hard to detect and even harder to intercept. So the risk of miscalculation or accidental escalation, it goes way up.
It's like a security dilemma, right? One country's attempt to boost its own security might end up making other countries feel less secure.
Exactly. It can create this spiral of mistrust and tension, which is never good.
So the Dark Eagle system might be a technological marvel, but its implications for global security, they're a lot more complex and uncertain.
That's the key takeaway, and it's the kind of nuanced analysis that UPSC examiners are looking for.
Exactly. Okay, let's bring it back to those environmental concerns. The study about manganese contamination in Bihar really highlights just how important clean water is.
It's a wake-up call for sure. It shows what can happen when we neglect environmental regulations.
It's a little unsettling, to be honest, to think that something as basic as water can become a source of harm.
And manganese is just one example. There are so many other pollutants out there that pose a threat to human health.
It's a big problem, especially for a country like India, where so many communities already struggle to access safe drinking water.
We need those sustainable water management practices, we need stricter enforcement of environmental laws, and we need effective monitoring to make sure that our water resources are safe.
Absolutely. And I think it also highlights the link between environmental health and social justice.
You're right. The communities that are most vulnerable are often the ones who are hit the hardest by pollution. And they're also the ones who often lack access to proper health care.
It's a complex problem with far-reaching consequences.
It is.
Well, from the intricacies of international security to something as fundamental as the right to clean water, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive.
We have.
And for all of you future IAS officers out there, each of these issues offers valuable lessons for the UPSC exam.
Remember, it's not about memorizing isolated facts. It's about understanding the root causes, seeing how all these issues connect, and thinking critically about their potential impact on India both now and in the future.
Wow, that was a whirlwind tour of current affairs. We've covered everything from sharks to AI to, the future of warfare. It's amazing how much is happening in the world every single day.
It is, and it's easy to get caught up in those individual news stories, but what's really important for UPSC aspirants is to step back and see that bigger picture.
Right, connect the dots.
Exactly. Think of each news item as like a piece of a puzzle. You need all the pieces to really understand what's going on in India and around the world.
So from today's deep dive, what are some of those key takeaways that our future IAS officers should really focus on?
Well, I think that case with the Chakki River and the NGT, that's a great example of how environmental issues often overlap with, legal and administrative frameworks. You have to know those institutions like the NGT, what they do, what powers they have.
It's not just about knowing the environmental science, it's also about the law and how it all fits together.
Exactly. And it reminds us that geography isn't just about maps and locations. It's about understanding how human activities impact the environment, how we manage resources, sustainable development, all of that.
All key themes in the UPSC syllabus for sure. And speaking of sustainable development, I think that IndiaAI Future Skills Platform is a really good example of how India is trying to become a global leader in tech while also focusing on inclusivity.
It's a smart strategy.
It is. That focus on Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, that's really important. It's about bringing those opportunities to everyone, not just those in the big cities.
And don't forget about the AI for social good aspect of the IndiaAI mission. That could easily be an essay topic. How can AI be used to address those big challenges in healthcare, education, agriculture, you name it?
It's a topic for sure.
Sure.
Okay, what else stood out to you?
Well, that Pandapul Hanuman temple case, that's a tricky one. It's about balancing those competing interests, conservation versus religious freedom, and finding a solution that respects both ecological and cultural values.
It's about finding that middle ground?
It is. And it also highlights how important the legal system is, the role of the judiciary in resolving these kinds of disputes. You could get a prelims question about, relevant articles of the Constitution, or maybe even a mains question asking you to analyze those challenges of balancing development and environmental protection.
So many layers to that issue.
Right. Okay, how about that study on manganese contamination in Bihar? That was a pretty sobering one.
It was. It really emphasizes the connection between environmental health and public well-being, and what can happen when we ignore those environmental regulations.
It's a wake-up call. Clean water is essential, and when it's contaminated, it can have serious consequences, especially for those vulnerable communities.
It's a reminder that we need to be proactive, invest in those sustainable solutions, enforce those environmental laws.
Absolutely. Now, let's not forget about the athlete biological passport.
The ABP, right.
It's a really interesting example of how we can use technology to address, ethical issues like doping in sports.
That's also a global issue, right?
It is, and it highlights the importance of international cooperation. Organizations like WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, they play a key role in promoting clean sport.
And knowing about those organizations, that's essential for the UPSC exam.
For sure. So as you can see, all of these seemingly unrelated news stories, they're actually connected in so many ways, and they all have something to teach us about the world and about India's place in it.
It's all about making those connections, seeing those patterns, and understanding the bigger picture.
Exactly. And as you're prepping for the UPSC exam, always ask yourself, why is this important? How does this relate to what I'm studying? Don't just memorize the facts. Dig deeper, think critically, analyze those implications, and consider what the future might hold.
That's great advice. So to all our aspiring IAS officers out there, keep your eyes on the news, keep asking those critical questions, and keep connecting those dots. Your success in the UPSC exam depends not just on what you know, but how you think.
Remember, curiosity is key. Keep that thirst for knowledge alive. Keep learning, and never stop believing in yourself.